Hi and welcome back. Today we're going to be making nails. Now historically nails fell into one of two groups. There was the regular square-sided tapered nail that everyone's familiar with, and that was used mainly to hold wood together, like for example the clapboard siding on a home or the shingles on a roof, that sort of thing. The other major group of nails is what I call hardware nails, and they were used, as the name implies, to hold hardware onto something like a door or a side of a building or what have you. This diagram illustrates the differences between the two kinds of nails. The construction nail is square and tapered on four sides, and the body of it is generally quite a bit heavier than the hardware nail. The hardware nail has a long, slender body without much of a taper at all. And the tip of the nail is usually hammered to a very fine point to make it easier to clinch. Here I have an exaggerated view of what that front and side profile would look like. The construction nail is designed to be driven directly into the framing of a building. The heavy shank allows it to be driven directly into the wood without any pilot hole. The hardware nail, on the other hand, gets driven into fairly thin stock, and then it gets bent over and clinched. That's where it gets its strength. You'll need a pilot hole to drive these thin nails into the board. Now I'm going to be demonstrating how to make a hardware nail today, because it's pretty much the only type of nails that we tend to make nowadays. No one's really interested in forging enough nails to build a house, but a few dozen nails to hold some hardware is a very reasonable thing to do. Hardware nails are made with a header that has a round hole. The hole in the header is the same size as the hole you're going to be putting into the hardware. So even though you're forging this nail the same way you would a square nail, the header will make sure that you have a shank that's round and a perfect fit for the hardware that you're using. I'm going to be making my nail header today out of this ball peen hammer. It's important not to overlook the ball peen hammer as a source of raw materials. You can pick them up at yard sales for next to nothing, and they really have a fair amount of material. For example, this end is 1 3/4 inches in diameter, and this part of the ball is exactly what I'm looking for today to make my nail header. So I'm just going to cut this off, weld it to a bar, and my 50-cent yard sale find is going to save me about 20 minutes worth of forging. The reason I'm using the ball from a ball peen hammer to make this nail set is because it gives me the high domed shape that you want on a nail set. This shape allows you to tip your hammer around the whole circumference of the nail head to direct the steel where you want it to go. So here I have the completed nail set. After annealing the head, I drilled a small pilot hole as close to the center as I could get it. And then I started sizing the hole with a tapered punch. The first step is to drift the top very carefully until you get the size of the nail that you want to make. And then you drift a larger tapered hole from the back of the nail set. You need to drift this hole very carefully. You want the two tapers to meet about 1/4 inch below the top surface of the nail set. You don't want to drive your punch any further than that, because that'll distort the hole that you've already created on the top. Now the most important thing about making nails, or at least making nails that are consistent, is to make sure that you have a nail bar that is sized properly to the nail set that you're using. These will need to be prepared ahead of time. The nail bar needs to be just slightly larger than the hole in the nail set. Nail headers hold up quite well without any heat treating, but if you're planning on making a lot of nails, you should heat treat it and draw the temper to a light straw. Anytime I'm doing repetitive work, I always clip a ruler to the face of the anvil. I start forging the nail by defining the offsets and then working that taper towards the tip. I find this method makes it easier to make a nail that's more consistent in length than the usual method of forging the tip and then working your way back to the offset. Hardware nails need to be very consistent in length because you're going to see the clinched ends of the nails. Once the nail is at the proper length, I'll start forging down the corners a little bit so that it slides into the nail header more easily. And then I'll use the last of the heat to clean up the profile of the nail. I always use at least 2 heats to make a nail. I'm not a professional nail maker, and I find that I need the extra heat to give me the time that I need to get the results that I'm after. When you break the nail away from the nail bar, you have to realize that the nail head is probably going to be off-center. So the first couple of hits should be aimed at recentering the head of the nail. If the head of the nail isn't centered over the shaft, it'll look like you drilled the holes in the hardware all over the place. So here you have the basic hardware nail. I could use this nail to fasten hardware to a heavy timber, but if I want to make a clinch nail, I need to perform one more step. Clinch nails are made by flattening the very tip of the nail that's going to be sticking out of the wood. Flattening the very tip of the nail allows you to clinch the nail without scarring the wood. This flat broad section also keeps the nail oriented with the grain. Now we're ready to actually mount some hardware. Here I have a mock-up of a typical barn door. The door boards are running 90 degrees to the framing for the door. The pilot hole that I'm using is about half the diameter of the nail shank. To drive the nail in, align the flat portion of the tip parallel to the framing for the door. You always want to clinch the nail across the grain, not with the grain. So the nail always gets oriented for the board that's going to receive the clinch. To start the clinch, I'll pre-bend the very tip of the nail with a pair of pliers or a wrench. And then with the nail head resting on an anvil or a heavy sledge, I'll clinch the nail until the hardware is pulled tight to the door frame. So that's how you make and use a hardware nail. They are a lot more involved than a regular nail, but I hope you'll agree that they're worth the effort. We'll see you next time.